Hello, fantasy football fans. Welcome to the Week 16 episode of the 9 Route, the fantasy football show that goes deep to help you win. I am your host, Austin Lee, and I'm joined by an old friend tonight, Mr. Bryan Fontaine of Pro Football Focus Fantasy and Rotogrinders. How's it going, Bryan?
Great, Austin. It's been too long. I was trying to figure out right before we came on air, and it's probably been 2+ years since we've done a podcast together. We used to hang out a bit for PFF fantasy, so this would be a good little trip down memory lane here.
Totally. I love it. This is a good PFF fantasy reunion. And yeah, I think it was 2012 we did podcasts almost every week back for PFF. That was good
It
stuff.
was 2012. So the one that comes to mind is, I know one of the probably the last ones we did is our Star Wars themed show where we dropped as many Star Wars references as humanly possible and giggled like little schoolgirls every time we said something. So yeah, that was really fun.
Yeah, I think we managed to squeeze about 30 or 40 into about a 30 or 40 minute show. It was my favorite episode of a podcast ever, I think. Yeah, go back in the archives and look for that one back in 2012.
It's of YouTube fame. I'm sure it's got at least 1 million downloads at this point. So
Certainly, at least. Well, tonight, obviously, Alex Emilio, he's on vacation tonight, so we've got our friend Bryan filling in, and we're going to cover the news and injuries. We're going to get you ready for your championship matchups, because we know all of you are in your championship games right now. And if you're not in your championship game, we've got a lot of DFS content for you tonight. Both Bryan and I are big fans of DFS, and we're going to give you some strategy tips and our picks for this week, and talk about some of these quarterback changes that are shaking things up. But let's dive into it. We're not going to cover every game tonight because we want to make sure we save lots of time for DFS. But let's go through some of these and talk about some of the highlights. We've got Thursday Night Football. I don't know that that's going to be a highlight. Tennessee at Jacksonville.
more of a low light than anything.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe there's a defensive play here worth using.
Anybody? Bueller?
Yeah, exactly. Let's move along. That's going to be a terrible game. What about Philadelphia at Washington in this Saturday? We got 2 Saturday games this week. It's a little Thanksgiving-ish in the sense that there's 3 games before you even get to Sunday. But we've got Philly at Washington coming up on Saturday, and this is supposed to be one of the higher scoring games according to Vegas. I see Philly scoring a lot of points here. I don't know if I see Washington doing all that well with RG3 at the helm. Is there excitement for you over this game, Bryan?
A little bit. I was definitely a little disappointed when this game wasn't going to be included on most of the daily sites running their big tournaments on Sunday with 1 p.m. Eastern. There is opportunities to play this game. I haven't checked yet to see if there's any Saturday start times, but yeah, I agree with you. I think this is definitely the Eagles. Washington's one of those teams, very similar to the Bears that we'll probably talk about, that are kind of just imploding on themselves. We saw what Odell Beckham did to this defense last week. I want to keep saying that Jeremy Maclin is going to get back to doing what he was doing, earlier in the season. He hasn't been as productive with Mark Sanchez there, so I think Maclin is the one guy that really kind of intrigues me out of this game. I'm not really touching anybody on Washington. I don't even think Alfred Morris is even any kind of a value play. And honestly, Austin, right before we came on the air, I'm checking the news feed at RotoWorld, and there's news that Chris Polk received the first running back rep at Eagles practice Wednesday. Looks like LaShawn McCoy just kind of laughed that off, but that gives me enough pause that I'm not too certain I'm going to pay $6,300 on DraftKings this weekend to play McCoy and Washington. If they've been able to hang their hat on anything this year, it's having a fairly stout run defense, most weeks, not all weeks, but yeah, I'd say maybe Macklin, and Sanchez is priced right. At 6,200. I mean, he has a chance to potentially triple his salary. I think he's more of a cash game play than a tournament play, just because I don't think there's huge upside to him. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying there. I think that the Washington run defense is strong, so I'm not looking at their rushers, and I think Macklin's the play here. We were talking a little bit about kind of the types of games we like to play in DFS, and I personally am not a big fan of these contests that only have 3 games or less in them.
They're brutal.
There's a lot of games this week where you can play the sort of Thursday, Saturday, Saturday combination without any Sunday games, or you can play the Sunday, Monday slate. I kind of fade all of the Thursday, Saturday action. I sort of feel like if I'm doing all this research and trying to get a leg up on my competition, and there's less decisions to be made, then my research doesn't give me as much of a leg up as it does if there's 12 games at play. So I kind of especially avoid cash games in those contests with fewer games. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, and you'll see them too if you log on to the 2 big sites, FanDuel and DraftKings. Usually they'll do like a 4 p.m. Eastern afternoon slate. You can sometimes play all the afternoon games, the primetime game on Sunday Night Football and also Monday Night Football. So that's a little bit differently. There's a little bit more skill to that, but I'm with you. Anytime you limit the player pool, I think some of that perceived edge can go away, and especially if you're playing like a primetime contest and you're just Sunday Night Football and just Monday Night Football. You basically have to pick the one guy that the Jordan Hill that just kind of catches Josh
Hill.
Yeah, thanks.
The Saints this past week, yeah.
Yeah, caught the 2 touchdown passes everybody thought Jimmy Graham would get. So you have to basically get out your magic 8-ball, figure out who that player is, and that's how you win all the money. But I'll do the same thing. I'll throw a couple bucks at a a guaranteed tournament and see what happens, but there's no reason to throw your money in a cash game in that spot. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I'd rather play like Afternoon Turbo or something like that, where DraftKings has 50-50s that it'll include 7 to 9 of the sort of 1 p.m. games. I'd rather do that slate of action than say like the primetime action or this Thursday, Saturday action here. I just like having a larger player pool. The other Saturday game is San Diego at San Francisco. Speaking of offenses that are imploding,
or the offenses that are offensive.
Yes, exactly. I see what you did there. Well, San Diego may be getting even more offensive with Keenan Allen likely done for the season. It's not official at this point, but he has a broken collarbone. And they haven't ruled him out this week yet, but it seems unlikely that
it's just a flesh wound.
Yeah, come back here. I'll bite your ankles off. Yeah, I don't think we're going to see Allen this week. And it also seems like Ryan Matthews is unlikely to play in this game. So the San Diego offense is a bit hobbled. And then San Francisco is a bit hobbled as well, with Frank Gore dealing with a concussion and Carlos Hyde dealing with an ankle and a back injury. In all of this mess between both of these teams, is there anyone who will benefit from one of these other guys being out?
Geez, I'm looking at the players available in this game, and I think if I'm going to play, I'm with you, I'm very unlikely to even play this Saturday slate. If I was going to play one guy from here, I think it would probably end up being Malcolm Floyd, just from the dollar, on a point per dollar basis, 4K on DraftKings. My personal projections, I've got him right in the 12 to 13 range. So, 3 times salary. He's one of those guys that could always, catch a bomb. Phillip Rivers, still a talented quarterback. He could still definitely get things done. I've been burned one too many times with Colin Kaepernick this year. I think I wrote him up probably about 3 or 4 times in my column for Rotogrinders, every single time. He just bombed, and he always just felt like that real safe cash game quarterback every week, just because of the rushing floor. And uh, this is another team that's kind of packed it in already. Who knows what's going to happen with the coaching staff with Jim Harbaugh? Who knows what the running backs are going to be. I feel like Vernon Davis is kind of going through the motions at this point. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to like here. But, if you wanted to be a little contrarian, maybe stacking up Phillip Rivers and Malcolm Floyd wouldn't be the worst idea in the world.
Yeah, I like that call. I like the Floyd call. I don't know that I would go crazy with the stacking, but just because San Francisco's defense is decent. But I like the Floyd call at that price. I think he's probably the biggest beneficiary of this whole mess. But let's move along to the Sunday games. We've got probably the big news of the day is this Detroit at Chicago game, where the Bears announced that they're going to start Jimmy Clausen over Jay Cutler. Smokin' Jay is going to sit on the bench. I've gotten a lot of Twitter questions about this, about how does it impact the value of the related players? Will Jay Cutler be as pouty on the bench as he is in the game? Things like that. I mean, what's your take on this?
This is almost something that I think Trestman had to do, and this is when you find out about a guy's true colors. When, God, I just read something right before we came on the air. I'm actually in the process of writing my Week 16 column with Rotogrinders right now, and stumbled across a comment that somebody in the Bears thought that Clausen was going to come in and light it up because he was going to run Trestman's offense to a T, and I kind of had to write that down and giggle a little bit about it. But I think I was just looking at the Vegas lines on this one. I think Detroit was, a 7-point road favorite. That's huge. I mean, and the fact that they're already kind of giving the Bears technically the gimme 3 points. I mean, this could easily be a 10-point win, if not more. And I don't think that Jimmy Clausen is going to miraculously become a good quarterback. I don't see them putting up any more than, say, 10 points in this one. And I think whatever Vegas is projecting as the team, the game total on this one, Lions are going to be getting all the rest of the points, in my opinion. I think they're in a really good spot this week.
Yeah, I like a lot of Lions players in DraftKings this week, and Chicago is a dumpster fire. I mean, the prices are high based on past performance, and we're not going to see that in this game, especially not against Detroit, especially not on the ground against Detroit. I would just avoid Chicago, and I think Detroit is a great defensive play this week. That's not rocket science here, but I think that's going to be a popular play this week, regardless of the price.
Yeah.
Let's skip through a couple of these other games, and then we'll come back around to some of our favorite picks of the week at DraftKings. We've got Baltimore at Houston, and it sounds like either Thad Lewis or Case Keenum is going to be starting at quarterback because Ryan Fitzpatrick's long gone and Tom Savage has been ruled out for Week 16, and they're just signing anybody off the street to try to help quarterback their team. How does this impact guys that people have been relying on, like Arian Foster or the receiving core there? Anything is anything worth salvaging in Houston with either of these quarterbacks at the helm?
Yeah, it's one of the guys I don't think I'm going to end up including in my write-up this week was DeAndre Hopkins, and I didn't get it even as far as trying to figure out what he did game log wise with Keenum last year. He has considerable upside, but he's really kind of still priced up from that monster week he had 2 weeks ago when he had that big day, and I think he's still kind of priced accordingly. There is some upside to him, but really. We don't know what Andre Johnson's status is, and after him, there's really not a whole lot of anything. And Baltimore's defense, although they're the cornerbacks and defensive backs they've been trotting out there, leave a lot to be desired. I just don't think that this quarterback, whoever it ends up being, is going to be able to make Hopkins more than I've got. Just looking at my projections here as like a high upside guy, I think he still has like some 25-point upside, but the downside is barely meeting 2 times value. If we consider, one of the things I like to do is take somebody's salary, you divide it by 100, so you get a decimal point. So you're looking at 6.3 points, and you want to get, at least 3 times that for a cash game, and 4 to 5 times that for a tournament. Really stretching it to even be a cash play for me this week. So I'm probably going to avoid that side of the ball altogether.
Yeah, I agree. And it sounds like Andre Johnson's going to play this week. Hopefully he clears the concussion protocol. But it's not a given. I would avoid Houston in this situation. And I've got a Baltimore player that I like, but I'll give you that guy later on when we talk about some of our picks.
I'll wait with bated breath and suspense here.
Yes,
or I could just read ahead to the show notes here and figure out who it is. But
no, quiet you!
No.
Don't give away all my secrets. I have to give them away in 15 minutes so that people actually listen to the whole show. Let's see. Let's talk about Julio Jones. Julio Jones missed last week's game, and the Falcons stack worked out pretty well for DraftKings players. It sounds like Julio Jones, with his hip injury, is going to give it a go this week, but he is a game-time call. Walk me through how you feel about the Atlanta offense here, with and without Jones. This is supposed to be one of the highest scoring games of the week, so this should be fantasy goodness. So how do we mine that as best as possible? How do you feel about the Falcons first?
Falcons here. Looking at projections, I would have liked Ryan if he stayed in that sub 7K range. I think he's now not necessarily a value. I mean, obviously, you mentioned he had the big day. Harry Douglas came up big for a relatively cheap price, and geez, his price looks like it went up about $1,800 from last week, just based on what he was able to do. That's one of the big things too, is you can't really, you have to, there's still a stock market element to daily, and I think you have to kind of, where it could be profitable to kind of have good forecasting in terms of projections and stuff, then you have to really kind of then take that projection and say, does this make sense? For 5,600, that does not make sense to me unless Julio Jones sits out again, and even at that point, he still needs to have 20 points to really feel like he was a good play that week. If he gets 15, you're kind of like not so great. So, I think they'll be able to attack the Saints through the air. This one, I believe, is in New Orleans, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, because week 1 they were in Atlanta, and Atlanta was able to kind of get that upset win week 1. And I know that you're kind of a Falcons honk a little bit, so with your Matt Ryan jersey right behind your left ear there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
they're gonna win this division at 6-10, man. It's gonna be amazing.
I'm not overly enthusiastic about a lot of these guys. Actually, the way I'm kind of looking at this game, I'm actually kind of high on Mark Ingram in this one. Just from a value point of view, and I think where the game script can kind of go. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think this thing could go back and forth through the air? I'm a little hesitant to really kind of believe Vegas on that one.
I believe Vegas in this one. I feel like I've watched Atlanta and New Orleans slug it out a lot over the years, and I actually think Matt Ryan is an okay play even without Julio Jones. Like, I'm looking at one of these receivers as the top dog to have a big day against the Saints. Now, I think the Saints side is a little easier to see, right? I mean, like you said, the game script calls for probably New Orleans to lead this game, win this game, do a lot of rushing to wind the clock late in the game. So that spells Mark Ingram. So I think at 6,100 over at DraftKings, I believe that's his price, Ingram makes for a good play this week. But I still like the Falcons a little bit more than you do here. I agree, though, that Matt Ryan's price at 74K, it's at 7,400, is a little high. But he has been really good the past few weeks. So I don't know. I'm kind of almost buying him as a cash play if you're going to go a little riskier or a little more expensive, maybe. Let's move on to another one of those 8 Sunday 1 p.m. games and talk a little bit about Green Bay at Tampa Bay, the Battle of the Bays. Aaron Rodgers, yeah, they're fierce
They're
rivals.
definitely within the same geographical location too. So
Exactly. It's the Battle of the Bay, and it's a very large bay. Um,
Chris
but
Berman used to have a joke about that that was really bad, and I wish I could remember what it was. But
I love his bad jokes. Um, Aaron Rodgers got shut down by Buffalo last week. May have looked better if Jordy Nelson had actually caught a long touchdown, but regardless, the Green Bay offense looked pretty terrible against Buffalo. How do you feel about them against Tampa Bay? Surely they got to get back on track here.
the one thing is I've got them all fairly high in my projections this week. I do like the spot Green Bay's in, but I was pretty surprised that they're all still relatively expensive on DraftKings. Aaron Rodgers had one of the worst games of his career last week, and he's still 9K. When I ever figure out the pricing algorithms on these sites, I'll win all the money, but sometimes it's not just based on what they did the week before. But the wide receivers. I really like both of them, both Nelson and Cobb, but I still relatively worry about what is the ultimate ceiling on them. I think they're both great cash game plays, but in terms of the tournament play, you really have to pick the guy that has the 2 touchdown upside. I think that does give the slight edge to Nelson. I think recency bias. I think people will be off him a little bit. Same with Cobb. I mean, both guys had really obviously poor games last week, so they're going to want to get back off the schneid. And I still think Eddie Lacy's in a good spot. I mean, he's not cheap, not overly expensive, but I think he's got 20-point upside. You're looking at three times value, and if he gets a couple touchdowns. And the only problem with that is I don't think everybody's going to have a huge day. It's either the passing game or the running game. I'm more inclined to think that they'll probably continue to have the balanced approach, which kind of doesn't have me overly excited about these guys. I'll have some exposure to them, but at this early junction on Wednesday, I'm really not completely sold on them, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, I think the one guy that stands out to me is Nelson as a cash game play. 7,700 is a little high for a tourney play for my liking, but I like him as a cash game play as kind of a safety play at wide receiver. But I'm not going to go out of my way to get Aaron Rodgers at that high a price. And I am a little surprised he's still that lofty, but he has been pretty freaking amazing this year, so it's not completely surprising.
Yeah, he's a little good at football.
He knows how to play the football. Let's talk about the 3 Sunday 4 p.m. games, the late afternoon slate. We've got the Giants at St. Louis. It sounds like maybe the story here is whether Rashad Jennings, with an ankle injury, will play, and if he doesn't, is Andre Williams worth a look in this situation against the Rams defense that has looked pretty good over the past few weeks? I think I'm avoiding this at all costs. Do you have any more optimism than I do?
No, I'm with you too. I want nothing to do. Actually, I'm probably one of the bigger Odell Beckham fans going. I think I had a streak of writing him up about 6 weeks in a row on my Rotogrinders column, and I had to put a little disclaimer at the beginning of my article this week of like, guys, it's a sad day. I won't be playing him this week. 9K on DraftKings. They finally gave him the love that he's kind of deserved, and I still think he's got potentially 30-point upside, but it's just not the matchup to go there. And I think the hordes are going to be all over him this week. I think it's the perfect scenario to fade him, just because of the public perception. They'll be all over him. I think he's got a fairly tough matchup on the road. I just, if there's ever going to be a week that he proves that he's actually mortal, I think it's this week. So, and the running game, I just, St. Louis, like you mentioned, is pretty tough against the run. This whole Giants side of the ball, I'm really looking elsewhere this week.
Yeah, completely agree. One of the other games in that slate is the Indy at Dallas game, and this one should be a high-scoring affair. with a lot of fantasy goodness in it. T.Y. Hilton is battling a bit of a hamstring injury. It sounds like he's going to play this week, but it's something to keep your eye on later in the week. If the news turns a little bit negative on him, you might find a value play with someone like Dante Moncrief, who laid a goose egg this past week, or maybe Hakeem Nicks, as much as that sort of makes me want to throw up in my mouth a little bit. I don't know. You just do you like any of these Colts guys if Hilton misses time?
I think it would probably be Moncrief would be the guy that I'd go to. I think he would assume all of Hilton snaps at most likely right wide receiver, not the white wide receiver, because that's too many W's in a row. He would be on the right side. I think he would see a lot of snaps there. And I got burnt by Moncrief. I had him on a few rosters, and getting a goose egg's never great. But it's not like his salary was too cost prohibitive that it really can't kind of sunk your team if he didn't get anything. And I think one of the best things about daily fantasy football is week to week. If you understand that there's variance, you understand that people can be shut down, and just know that that's not a precursor to what's going to happen the following week. You can kind of use that to your advantage. Nobody's going to be on Moncrief this week. His ownership might tick up if Hilton is out, but I'm all over Hilton this week. Most likely, he's going to be the centerpiece of the offense. I'm going to be writing him up in my column this week. And the number one reason why I want to go on Hilton this week, he's most likely lining up across Brandon Carr this week. Every single week, you can almost set your watch to it. Whoever the wide receiver that's going to be going at Carr is just going to have a monster week. It's almost science. Science!
I like it. You blinded me with science. I like it. I think that digging into some of these one-on-one matchups that happen is a real key to succeeding in DFS, and understanding how often a guy's going to line up across from another guy. And I think this is a great example. So hopefully Hilton gets healed up and can take advantage of that this week.
Yeah, I know our good friend Mike Clay is one of the best out there at putting that information out there. So yeah, definitely go check that out over at PFF Fantasy. That's one of the best things that they do over there, is that the wide receiver cornerback matchup.
Yeah, totally. I look at that all the time. PFF Fantasy Gold is gold. He does a really great job with that. Mike Clay rocks the spot. The other side of the ball is probably the bigger story in this game. We've got DeMarco Murray, who broke his hand in this last game, had surgery, but it sounds like he's going to play this week. People are a little nervy, though, and kind of making backup plans here. First off, are you concerned about Murray going up against Indy this week, and are you hearing anything differently about his injury situation?
No, I kind of heard exactly what you did. It looks like he was going to try to give it a go. Call me old-fashioned, but if you have surgery on a body part that is a requirement of you doing your job, then it might preclude you from performing that said job well. If I broke my hand, I probably wouldn't be able to type that well on a keyboard. I don't know.
Hold on a second. Did you just compare your typing job to DeMarco Murray's ability to hold and catch a football? I'm just curious.
I think I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's pretty much. I was thinking the same thing, but I just wanted to double check.
Limber up.
Right. Yeah. Be sure you stretch. Stretching is very important before the typing. The typing is very difficult.
I'm just, given, the funny thing is about Murray is his salary is across the industry nobody factored in his injury into his price this week. So even we know he's going to be less than 100%, even if he does go 9,300 on DraftKings. There's very few running backs I would pay that price for. If he was completely healthy, yeah, I think the matchup would have been there for him to take advantage of that situation. But yeah, I'm just not even going to go that way. What do you think about Dunbar and Randall? Because I don't know a lot about either of these guys. I mean, I do a lot less dynasty stuff than I used to, and I don't remember either of these guys really being Feature back type guys are more role players, and I think those guys, to me, at least on the surface, look like value traps in DFS this weekend, even though they're both minimum price. What do you think about those guys?
I am tempted to go with Joseph Randle if he's, minimum price and Murray is out. I think he's the sort of first and second down back in this situation, and Dunbar is more of the passing down back in this attack. But you certainly don't want to assume that Randle's going to get anywhere near the production that Murray would get. I think that Randle would be maybe flirting with top 20 running back, but I think if you're thinking he's going to be in the top 15 even with Murray out, I think that would be dangerous. I'm thinking he's in that 20 to 25 range with Murray if Murray misses time here. So yeah, it's a value trap potentially, but if it's cheap enough, I might jump into that trap.
It's a trap.
That's a trap.
You walked right into that one, my friend.
Exactly, I totally did.
Either that or you set me up for it perfectly. I don't know what it was, but it is 12:39 East Coast time right now, so that could be a little delirious.
You are live from New England. I like that on your little overlay on the video version here. It's as if New England maybe doesn't have a whole lot of video cameras, and that you found the one that's broadcasting you live. I like that.
See, the unfortunate thing, and I don't have the heart to tell the guys at Rotogrinders that New England actually isn't a state. Boston isn't the capital of New England, so we'll.
Tom Brady isn't the mayor. I get confused. I'm all the way out here in California. I can't keep up with all the news. One of our favorite listeners, Jill, has written us a question here. She picked up Joseph Randle in case DeMarco Murray is out. Now, let's say DeMarco Murray sits. She's wondering if she should play Joseph Randle or Jonathan Stewart or Shane Vereen. Now, this is a PPR league. We were talking about Randle as a potential trap. I would actually play him over both of these guys in this situation, although Vereen has the upside to do it. I'm a little bit off Stewart this week because I think D'Angelo Williams is going to come back this week and steal some of his touches. Which of these sort of mediocre running back plays would you be most interested in?
And you said it was a PPR league?
It's a PPR league, and it's either a Randle, imagining that Murray sits, Stewart, or Vereen.
See, a lot of those guys are actually really close in my rankings this week. I think where's the... Yeah, so I think both Stewart and Vereen actually on the high end probably have 18 and 19 point upside. I think Vereen is the more of a long shot just because trying to figure out what Bill Belichick can do on a weekly basis, it would make sense that they would make this a Vereen game and take advantage of the poor pass defense that the Jets have and not really run at their strength. So I can see that one. If D'Angelo Williams is back, the coaching staff in Carolina has shown no willingness to give Stewart all the carries if Williams is also there. It was kind of nice to see a little bit of renaissance from Stewart lately, just because I've always felt like he's one of the most talented backs in the league. I guess it would all come down to what you need. If you're the underdog, I would probably go with Vereen. If you just need some steady points, that 10-point floor, I think Randall's the guy that'll get you there. But if it was me, if I was a huge underdog going into a title game, I think I would actually throw Vereen out there, just because I think he's got the highest upside of the three.
Yeah, I think that's a fair advice, especially in PPR. I think that's a good take on it. And before we leave this Indy at Dallas game, you were mentioning Dante Moncrief. He had such a low price last week that it wasn't too big a deal that he laid a goose egg, and that's a great point because the FanDuel $2 million winner had Moncrief in his lineup. That's how much it didn't torpedo his lineup. So
I think he just knew that, and he just wanted to handicap the field a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, okay, guys, I'll spot you one player and play you with one hand behind my back, and I'm still going to win $2 million. That was pretty amazing. That was a ballsy move. Let's talk about
what's that quote from Dodgeball that's an interesting play there, Cotton.
If you can dodge a ball, you can dodge a wrench. Is that what it is?
It's the part with the guys from the ESPN, the Ocho. It's what the hell's the guy? I should know the guy's name. My brain is on shutdown mode right now. I'm gonna have to Google that quote while you.
Yes, definitely. Well, I'll cover a little information on the next games.
Yep.
We've got we're going to skip ahead.
To talk about today.
Exactly. We want to make sure we give the listeners the dodgeball quote before we get out of this episode because they will not succeed in their championship matchups without it. I am sure of it. Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football have a couple of interesting games for different reasons. Sunday Night Football should be a defensive matchup. Seattle at Arizona. I don't think there's a whole lot to say about this one. Arizona has a decent rush defense, so I'm not really looking for Lynch to have an especially big day here. And Arizona's offense looks terrible, so I'm not expecting anything from them. Seattle, even on the road, could be a decent defensive play here against Arizona's sort of flailing offense.
All right, here we go. I got to cut you off before we can get going.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off.
That was the quote. Wise words. Wise words.
All right, continue.
Okay, excellent. Let's talk about Monday Night Football. This should be a more interesting game. Denver at Cincinnati. Looks like Julius Thomas has been back and playing, but I sort of use playing loosely because he's getting less than half the snaps. Yeah. Air quotes playing because he's getting less than half the snaps, and his price keeps deflating and tempting me. And I feel like this is the genuine trap for me in DFS that I'm going to fade. Like even I think he's 4,800 this week, and I'm just like, nope, still not going to do it. Am I alone in that, or is he finally coming back into value for you here?
Still, he's just so touchdown dependent. I think he has potential to hit 3 times his salary this week. I think it's a lot more likely that he doesn't. So I'm with you. I'm probably not really centering my focus on him this week. And this is a weird game too. Like, I know that a lot of people are calling for this to be a high-scoring affair, but I think Vegas had the Broncos projected to score 26 to 27 points, which by their standards is fairly low scoring. And they've been so run-focused lately. I think I can't remember if it was the NFL Around the NFL podcast. I think Chris Wesley maybe even had mentioned it this past week that the Broncos the last 3 games have been the run heaviest in Peyton Manning's career, dating back to like 2005. I don't know if that would have been Joseph Adai, but I don't know. Peyton Manning doesn't look right. Obviously, this past week he had the flu. He got the thigh injury. They brought in Brock Osweiler. Just something's not right there, and I just have this inkling that this could be a big C.J. Anderson week again. I'm really on him this week. I'm going to be writing him up. I think if Denver wants to win this game pretty handily, I think they're going to rely on the ground game and some situational passing from Manning. I don't think he'll. I don't think he's going to light the world on fire, but I still think he's got 20-point. A 20-point floor, but not much higher than a ceiling, and that really makes a lot of the receivers really risky propositions, especially Demaryius Thomas. Is still one of the elite level guys in terms of pricing across the industry. I guess if I mention one other guy that I'm a little intrigued on, just because his price has kind of fallen a little bit, is Emmanuel Sanders. I think he's a guy that's got over 20-point upside, and he's only. Well, I should say not only because it's still relatively expensive in terms of DraftKings dollars, but $7,200 makes it a lot easier to stomach playing him than I believe he was in the 8K range for quite a few weeks in a row. So and I don't know what Andy Dalton we're going to get this week. I mean, he's priced right. You could potentially consider making him a tournament play, but Denver's defense has also been playing extremely well lately too. This game just kind of looks to me on the surface as potentially being under what Vegas is projecting at this point.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a game script that calls for C.J. Anderson to have a big game. So I like him even at 6.9K at DraftKings. Cincinnati's pass defense is a lot better than their run defense, and I think we're going to see them trying to take some pressure off Manning here, who doesn't seem 100% healthy. Even at 80% healthy, he'll still have a decent game. But I think we'll see C.J. Anderson featured pretty heavily here. I like Andy Dalton a little bit at the price he's at. He's only 5,900, but he's a little bit of a riskier play because, like you said, Denver has looked better. But I think their run defense is stronger than their pass defense. So I think if Cincinnati's going to get anything done, I think it's going to have to go through Dalton. I don't really like stacking him with A.J. Green this week because Green's price is really high, but I might like Dalton as a standalone in this situation against Denver at less than 6K.
Any love at all for Mohamed Sanu? He kind of came out a little bit interesting on my projections this week. Not so much that I'd want to play him just because he's been playing so poorly lately, but he kind of looks interesting to me.
What's his price at DraftKings?
3,800. And I've got him projected at about 12 DraftKings points, so right in that 3 times range.
Yeah, that might be an interesting stack, an Andy Dalton Sanu stack. I don't know. He hasn't done a whole lot, I feel like, since.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the thing I keep talking myself out of. I'm sure I'll talk myself into it come Sunday morning and hate myself Tuesday morning, but
I feel like Sanu, such as DFS.
I was gonna say such as life too, but.
Oh, you went there. You did get big. My little microcosm was just thinking, just the DFS thing. I don't think I would mess with Sanu here. His price is kind of intriguing, but I feel like he maybe had
looking at my Magic spreadsheet on him, he's only gotten about 11% market share the last few weeks in targets, and has 3 catches for 20 yards combined in the last 2 games. So you are definitely walking off a short plank when you're going to give him any kind of consideration this week. Yeah, but if he blows out this week, you heard it here first. The one and only show this week that'll mention him as a recommended play.
I think if I was going to walk off a plank with a guy this week, I'd rather go for like a minimum price guy like Paul Richardson or something like that. Just like throw a dart at a guy who saw just a little bit of an uptick this week, but is still not quite on the radar. But I'm staying away from Sanu. I'm not tempted. You can't tempt me, Bryan Fontaine.
Bryan Fantana.
Bryan Fantana. What was Sex Panther? That's an old callback to our show from 2 years ago. Hey, if you want to check out my rankings or Alex Melio's rankings, you can get those over at the9route.com, as always. And they're always updated into the last minute before those Sunday kickoffs. We've also got our daily fantasy sports tools over there that give you kind of advice on players you could pick at FanDuel or DraftKings that sort of automated based on our rankings. So go check that out over at the9route.com. It's got all the things related to the podcast as well. We've got a Twitter question here that may be up your alley. I'm not sure because we haven't chatted much about this in a while. But I got Lucas asking, is there any just general good strategy that managers should be thinking about this time of year regarding keepers? Now, I know you used to be a really big dynasty guy. Are you a little bit, kind of focused more on DFS, or do you have some general advice for Lucas in terms of what he should be looking for keeper-wise this time of year?
Yeah, I've definitely shifted my focus too, but these older backs, it's tough. I mean, their value can evaporate so quickly. I'm trying to think of some. I mean, even as a really poor example, but even I guess you've got risk with anybody, because I was going to use Adrian Peterson as an example this year, that if you drafted him and you basically got nothing out of him due to his legal situation, you can't really forecast those type of things. But in terms of players breaking down, I used to be a really big age proponent guy. Austin, you've done tons of studies in the past with the age of decline stuff. You had a great series on PFF a couple of years ago that went over those, and there's always going to be outliers like Peyton Manning and Priest Holmes and a couple of those other guys that really kind of come to mind that really kind of buck the trends. But I think on average, I think you can kind of use those age charts to kind of make good sound decisions. There's always going to be outliers, but I think if you uh, kind of treat those accordingly, I think you can make good decisions. I don't like to keep old running backs all that often just because they can just really lose all value altogether. And I'm not saying that you want to keep um, you know Kristen Michael over Marshawn Lynch, but those are type of things that I think also owners can tend to overthink it a little bit. So I guess my word of advice is don't get too cute with it, but then don't also be the guy that keeps Steven Jackson going into last year. I mean, there's certain times that players are just really kind of used up, and you don't want to put your team at a huge disadvantage going into the following season when you could have made a better decision the year before.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And in terms of Lucas is also mentioning a couple running backs. He has Jamal Charles and Matt Forte. Matt Forte, I believe, turns 30 next season. I think he's a little bit on the older side, and Forte is a guy that I sort of got on my radar as like maybe I'd rather bail a year too early than a year too late on. If you can get really high value for Forte, like for example, if he has a really big game, these next two games. Like I'd wait and see if he has a big week 16 or 17, then maybe that's an opportunity to be like, yeah, I need to sell Forte for something in a dynasty league and sort of either get younger or find value elsewhere. Jamal Charles, I feel okay about in terms of going forward. That's another one that Lucas is asking about. But generally, running backs, they start to decline after about 26 years old. There's not really this wall at 30 years old. It's sort of like a steady decline after 26. You see it from several guys in the past, and you kind of got to watch for those little clues that they're on the downturn and try to get out before other people recognize those clues.
And it's not to say that they're not usable players, but I think if you have to project them to be at the top end of a fantasy draft, I think I don't have any studies in front of me or anything, but you can almost kind of start dropping them down a few rounds every year. Forte is not going to be a guy that we're going to probably consider in the first round next year, and we don't even know what his situation is going to be like. The whole landscape could change in Chicago, for example. I don't think he's always been the most talented player. I think he's definitely been a huge beneficiary of being the one guy in town, and then looking into a really running back friendly scheme with Mark Trestman. So yeah, it's interesting, and that's just one of the things year to year too. There's so much that can change between now and next September. There'll probably be 8 new head coaches next year. There'll be all kinds of new offensive coordinators. Rookies coming in. It's tough. It's one of those things. Hard telling, not knowing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you're right about Forte there. With Trestman likely to be gone at the end of this season, I think that he could see a very different scenario in September. And then, Kadeem Carey was drafted there. He's not, flashing a ton of amazing stuff, but when you've got a guy there that could take some of those touches away, likely the younger guy is going to start siphoning off some of that value in the coming years. Let's dive into some of our picks at DraftKings that we didn't get a chance to talk about when we kind of ran through some of the games. Maybe talk about some stacks or some other players we haven't mentioned. I'll go with some of my stacks first here, in case so I can steal your ideas first and leave you with none. That's my goal.
You have one of my 2 stacks, so it must be a good one.
Yes, I love it. And it's got to be Josh McCown and Mike Evans. Yes?
No.
Crap. All right. Well, it was worth a shot. I like Josh McCown and Mike Evans this week. They're only 12.2K combined at DraftKings. They're playing Green Bay in Tampa Bay, and I imagine that they'll be playing catch-up in this one, and this pair will have to connect in order to have any chance to keep up a little bit here with Green Bay. I think that Green Bay is going to throttle these guys and leave a lot of trash time action for McCown and Evans. All right, I chose my one. You can take the other one that we probably both have on our lists here.
Well, I'll go with my other one, and then I'll let you take the lead on the other one, and I'll kind of chip in as I can. But I think the one this is the one that I think is under the radar, and I know we kind of just glossed over this game, but the Arizona-Seattle game, I actually really like Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin this week. I think they're both in a great spot. I'll be covering both in my column this week. And Russell Wilson scores almost like 10 fantasy points more per week in road games this year than at home. And they're already projected to be 7-point favorites, but I think they're going to be able to move the ball quite a bit. Baldwin's a guy that's relatively cheaply priced, and he is the number one guy there. I can see those guys connected for a touchdown this week. Baldwin's price is, I don't have it right in front of me. I know it's really low on DraftKings this week, and I think, where was Russell Wilson? He's 7,100. So not too expensive. You're right in that mid range there, but I think he's a guy that's got 25-point upside, and his floor is relatively low too, just because he scrambles and runs the ball on so many designed runs. So I think he's kind of sneaky in a tournament, but I think he's a great cash game play this week too.
Yeah, that's an interesting call. I remember earlier in the year that one of the Millionaire Maker winners had Russell Wilson as his quarterback, and he didn't stack him. I feel like Wilson is one of those guys that has enough upside that you don't have to stack him to put him in a GPP situation.
Exactly. Yeah, you call it the naked stack, which sounds a little dirty, but
this is a PG family show, Mr. Guest Fontaine. No, I can see that working no matter what you call it. I'm not gonna judge. Actually, I probably just did. But Russell Wilson. I like the Russell Wilson call. I'm not as big on the Doug Baldwin call, but Arizona's pass defense is not as good as the rush defense, so I could see this working out for Doug Baldwin. I might even be more inclined to do like a Russell Wilson, Paul Richardson stack. It's crazy, but I like Russell Wilson in that matchup as well.
All right, I'll do a quick reboot on the conversation here. Stafford and Golden Tate, I think is the other one that we both kind of like. I think it's pretty easy to see why Chicago's a dumpster fire at this point. And it's just interesting that you also chose to stack Tate with him rather than Calvin Johnson. So, I think Tate's in a really good spot this week. I can see him being a 20-point guy this week. I think he's got a great matchup with their rookie Fuller. And I think he's going to be able to take full advantage of that, and I think people are just going to gravitate towards Calvin Johnson this week. And I think he's a good play, but I think Tate's a better play.
Yeah, I think Calvin Johnson's price is so high that stacking him with Stafford takes too much out of your money out of your tournament play there. So I like stacking him with Tate instead. Let's move on to quarterbacks before we run out of time here. Is there a... yeah, our listeners are well aware of my mic being messed up. Go ahead and take over for a second.
Yeah, I thought I might drop it on the reboot the comment there, but quarterback wise, there's some good plays there. Like I said, I like Wilson and Stafford. I think they're guys that both are good cash game and tournament plays. Dropping down. I think you can still go with the usual suspects. I think Luck and Rodgers are definitely in play for me this week. They offer the safety. And I think Tom Brady's in a good spot too. I think he potentially could be sneaky. He traditionally plays really well against the Jets, and they, like we mentioned a while ago, I think they could be in a good spot where they're going to attack that team through the air. It could be a lot of Gronk, it could be a lot of Edelman, a lot of quick strikes to kind of take advantage of that Jets defense that they are going to be blitzing quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see Rex Ryan kind of make this week 16 game his Super Bowl. Try to derail the Patriots season a little bit. They're division rivals. I don't know. What do you think, Austin? Looks like he's still getting booted up here.
All right, I think I'm back. Can you hear me okay?
You are back. Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. Okay, sorry about that again. I'll figure out these technical issues one day. Where did we leave off here? Because I couldn't hear anything.
Quarterbacks. I just kind of went through. I said, I do like Wilson both as tournament and cash game for Wilson and Stafford, but also like Luck and Rodgers, and to a certain extent Tom Brady this week.
Great, great. Let's talk about running backs. We mentioned a few of these guys earlier. We mentioned Mark Ingram already. He's a guy I have on my list. I actually like Pierre Thomas as well in DraftKings PPR format at only 3,800. I also have, we mentioned C.J. Anderson. I like Joique Bell this week at Chicago, the dumpster fire Bears. I think even at 6K, Joique Bell could see a lot of action as the Detroit Lions sort of milk the clock at the end of this game. And then I think people are going to really like Jeremy Hill this week, and I'm going to try to fade him in this situation just because he had such a big game last week. Do you see something here that makes you want to go back to the hill here on this one?
No, I'm running from the hills on this one. One of the things that I don't like to do, I don't like to chase points, especially in a week where the matchup isn't ideal. I think this contest with against the Broncos, and they are where's my information on that one? They're one of the toughest run defenses against running backs this year. I still think Vegas projects this game to be fairly close with Denver winning, but I just 5,600 isn't too cost prohibitive, but I just don't see the same upside there that's with him this week that there was last week. I mean, he had considerable upside at a much cheaper price, and it's just for the game script to go the way that it would need to for him to have a big game, it just seems entirely unlikely.
Yeah, I agree. I would rather pivot to a guy like Fred Jackson at Oakland, who's 5,500. I think he catches a lot of passes, so that could be a good PPR play. And a guy I really like is Trey Mason versus the Giants for only 4,600.
Yeah, I love him this week.
Trey Mason is, he's had a little bit of, off games, but he's had some tough matchups. The Giants are not a tough matchup on the ground. I think Mason's going to have a huge game here, and he should be a pretty popular play this week. Are there any other running backs that you're high on this week?
We mentioned Anderson, Ingram, Mason. I'm probably really high on Mason. I don't think he's got the upside of like when he faced Oakland earlier this year at a similar price point. But you're a Dolphins fan. What do you think about Lamar Miller? Because I think he's in a pretty decent spot against Minnesota this week.
Yeah, the matchup is tasty. He is not really getting the touches that makes me excited about him as more than maybe a cash play. I feel like Miami is committed to not giving him a full workload, and he seems to walk out of these games not quite getting to 20 touches like some of these other high upside guys. So that kind of scares me away from Miller. It has nothing to do with talent or the setup. They're not leaning on him the way I would like to see it. Are you seeing it differently?
Yeah, I think he's in that range where I much like him better, like you mentioned, as a cash game play. 4,400 is really good there, and I think it'll be easy for him. I've actually got him as potentially as a 4 times salary guy, even with the lower workload. So I think 3 times salary is definitely within range. You mentioned the matchup there, and they got to give him the ball at some point. But we'll see. I'm not going all in on him this week, but I definitely think he's an interesting play.
Yeah, I think he's a guy to keep an eye on, maybe get a little exposure to. Over at wide receiver, we mentioned already Jordy Nelson, and I teased my player that I like for Baltimore here. I feel like Steve Smith is especially low priced this week at only 4,100. DraftKings against Houston here. Is Steve Smith a guy you could see as a potential value this week, or you're like, nah, I'm staying away from the old man?
You know what? The funny thing is you and I didn't really share notes that far in advance of the show here, and I don't know if I feel really good the fact that we're on a lot of the same guys this week, or really bad because we're on a lot of the same guys this week. So I have Steve Smith as he's going to be in my write-up this week. I think he's in a really good spot, especially with Torrey Smith banged up. The price is right on him quite a bit. The matchup is there. I really like him a lot.
We could see some high ownership percentages from some of these guys. So yeah, I feel your both good and badness about some of this, that we might need to sort of pivot to some other guys if these are going to be really popular plays. I've got a few mid-range receivers that I kind of like that are roughly all the same price. Kenny Stills, Vincent Jackson, and Brandon LaFell. I feel a little bit better about Stills, but he's the higher priced of the three at $5,700. Jackson's $100 less, and LaFell is $5,300 against that suspect Jets secondary. Are there any of these three guys that you're interested in this week?
I think I'd probably be the most interested in LaFell. I haven't looked at his matchup specifically on who he's going to get matched up against on the Jets there. So I think they're in probably one of the better spots. He's definitely one of the base receivers for the Patriots. I think it ticks off all the boxes that you need it to with a good quarterback, the good matchup, the game script. I think I think he's in the good spot there. I'm on a lot of the receivers who kind of already had chatted a little bit. Depending on the injury to the T.Y. Hilton with the hamstring, actually I think that could potentially drive his ownership down. If he's healthy, he's the one wide receiver that I really want to pay up for this week. I mentioned the Brandon Carr matchup being just basically just turns into a matador and just lets wide receivers kind of run by. Golden Tate, we mentioned him too. I think he's one of those guys. I think he's grossly underpriced this week. Just looking down through my list here, I mentioned Steve Smith, and the other. Who was the other guy that This is riveting radio right now, by the way.
Well, I want to point out that you might be on Brandon LaFell because you have all this sort of New England paraphernalia going on back there. I don't want to claim bias or anything, but there is some New England stuff back there.
There's even a number 7 Fontaine right there.
Oh man, I didn't see that. That is awesome.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Some of my employees gave that to me last year sometime, but yeah.
That's awesome. That is
actually
super
I have
cool.
a number 7 Fontaine jersey that I used to wear around all the time, and I remember being in Boston, and one guy's like, he thought I actually had played on the team at one point, and I told him I was like, I was the 3rd string quarterback a couple years ago, and he believed me, and I just didn't have the heart to tell him I was totally pulling his leg, but.
Yeah, you don't remember me? I was the holder on the extra points. All those extra points that were made, it was all about me.
Yeah, the other, I already mentioned him too, kind of with Baldwin. I like him quite a bit. Let's see if I can find one value. Yeah, he kind of really have talked me off the ledge with Sanu.
Yes, mission accomplished.
I don't know. The pricing's pretty good this week. I thought. There's not that many obvious values that I think that if you have your wits about you this weekend, and I think if you don't overthink it, I don't know, maybe the pivot in that game that I know that you like Stills. I think Colston at 4,600 is also relatively good. I don't know right off the top of my head what his track record is against Atlanta, but that's a guy that we shouldn't really overlook as well, because I think he's a guy that has a 20-point upside.
No, that's not a bad call, especially in a game where New Orleans should really score a crazy amount of points. Let's talk about tight ends. I like Miami's Charles Clay. Yes, maybe I'm biased, but at 3,500, I like Clay versus Minnesota here. Do you have a tight end or two that you're excited about?
I have a tendency, and I have all year, to fade Gronk and Graham every single week. It almost seems like it's too easy just to pick one of those guys. Actually, the last few weeks I've been using Greg Olsen, and he's come up in a big way. I think he's in a good spot now, but I think he's more appropriately priced. I think the quarterback situation this week, not knowing if it's going to be, it most likely will be Cam Newton. That doesn't really do anything. I think Olsen's been productive with both guys. I really want it to be a Travis Kelce week at some week, but I don't necessarily think it's this week. I don't know. The guy that I'm probably going to go to the most is probably Jason Witten, just because of the track record that teams have had against Indianapolis from the tight end position. I think I'll probably have quite a bit of him, but it's mostly just to kind of get a safe floor on a team. He's not going to win you any tournaments from that position, but there's relatively few guys at that position. especially this week, that are really going to do that for you. So you might as well get a guy that's, pretty much a lock for 10 points, and anything after that is kind of gravy and doesn't really cost you a whole lot. My one sleeper tight end this week and is minimum priced, and I'm going to write him up this week, and I'll probably regret this Tuesday morning, but Scott Chandler for Buffalo going up against Oakland. I think right now, he's looking at probably he's going to be a 6 to 7 point guy, but looking at some of the numbers, I think he's actually a guy that has 16 point upside, which is crazy at his price. Oakland's been really bad against defending tight ends, and I think if they're going to get the passing game going, he's been okay. Nobody's going to be on him. I mean, his ownership level is going to be, 0.1%. It'll basically probably be you and his mom that roster him this weekend. So, but if you really want one of those off the board plays, he's a guy that I'm going to kind of sprinkle in some tournament lineups and see if it pays off.
Yeah, I've faced Scott Chandler's mom in head-to-head matchups at FanDuel quite a bit this year, and she is a fierce competitor. So I'm not going to doubt her call on this. And just hearing you say that, yeah, maybe he's a good call too, kind of confirms for me that I should probably get him in my lineups. I think that's a good call. Let's wrap this up real quick with some defenses. We already mentioned the Lions' defense against those good old Chicago Bears. They're 3,100. I like, and I swear this isn't biased because usually my bias is to be very negative about the Dolphins, but this week I'm positive and feeling good about them versus Minnesota at only 2,800 at defense. Do you have a defense that you like this week?
See, I usually just use a random number generator to pick my defense. It's worked out well for me. But
you get a 20-sided die and calculate your hit points or something.
Some D&D die.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I like the Bills this week. I kind of like the Packers. The Patriots, I think, are in a good spot. I can see the Dolphins. I wouldn't make them my primary defense this week, but I can see some merit to that. The Lions, I got to actually update my numbers because I'm just basing them on facing and Cutler, and I think Clausen's actually going to be a larger train wreck and more likely to turn the ball over. So, I might move them up. But like you said, I think they're going to be the most popular defense this week, and I never worry about ownership level with defense. I think more so than anything, especially on DraftKings, the pricing is always so clumped together that they make the clear poor teams at a price point you wouldn't even want to consider them, and all the viable options are all within a few $100s of each other. It makes it pretty easy to just pick one. I guess the one that we didn't really bring up that I think has some merit is the Seahawks, but their defense isn't as stingy against the road on the road, but going up against former cast-off Ryan Lindley, potentially a little bit of Logan Thomas sprinkled in there. They could be looking at a pick six easily, maybe one or two of them. So they're more cost prohibitive at 3,700. I think they're the most expensive defense on DraftKings this weekend.
Yeah. They may have 5 pick sixes though, so it could work out. You've been mentioning this article that you're working on. Where can people find this article that you post with your picks of the week?
They can find it on Rotogrinders.com. It's advanced matchup plays. I wish I was smart enough to come up with that article title on my own, but I kind of go through and make recommendations at each position. I don't do defenses in that. And then they also will post that at the daily page that they have set up, splash page on RotoWorld, which is kind of cool. But I think Rotogrinders is the best place to find it, and they're a really good growing community for daily fantasy content out there.
That's awesome. Is there anything else that people should be looking for from you? Anything else you want to promote?
Not really. Do a podcast with those guys, or I guess a YouTube cast similar to this Thursday nights at like 7 o'clock, and just kind of do the same thing, kind of go through the game slate. So, but yeah, no, that's pretty much it. I lay low these days. I'm not trying to out being the hey, look at me guy. I just kind of go about my business and It's worked out pretty well. It's been good to catch up, though, Austin. It's been far too long.
It's been way too long. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It's been really fun and brought back some good memories, some good vibes, and I hope we can do it again sometime soon, man. And good luck in Week 16 here, buddy.
Yeah, you too. I hope to see you atop the leaderboard.
Thanks. Yep, we'll see. We'll see about that. Cool, man. Well, thank you all for listening tonight. Sorry we went a little bit long, but we were just having too much fun. You know, that's how we roll here at the 9 Route. And you can always catch my normalized strength of schedule tool that I put up on Football Guys every week. And be sure to check everything out over at the9route.com. If you want to chat with us on Twitter, you can find Bryan Fontaine at Bryan_Fontaine. You can find me at Austin NFL. Alex and I will be taking a little break for the holidays and won't be doing a Week 17 show, but we do plan on coming back strong in January and doing plenty of off-season shows, hopefully at least every other week, to keep you informed of all of the happenings during the NFL offseason, if you believe that there's actually an offseason, which there isn't, because it just it's nonstop. It's nonstop. I love it. I don't know about you, Bryan, but I pay attention all year long.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So until next time, thanks for listening. May your players stay healthy, your sleepers wake up, and your Monday nights be filled with miraculous comebacks. Good night.